encounters between artists and other protagonists in the performing arts. Kitchen Talks is supported by National Performance Network Stepping Out, funded by the Federal Government Commissioner for Culture and Media within the framework of the initiative Neustart Kultur, Assistance Program for Dance. I would like to introduce and welcome you to our speakers of today's edition, titled Challenges for the Performing Arts, Voices from Latin America Too. Nayse Lopez from Brazil, Vera Garat from Uruguay, Shoshana Polanco from Argentina, Mexico, and Dianelis Diéguez from Cuba and Spain. And Lorena is with us tonight to translate into English. And now I'm passing over to Carla Estefan, who is curating and moderating this episode tonight. Thank you so much, Carla, for bringing all these women together tonight, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Wayne. Hola a todas, buenas tardes, buen día, buenas noches, de donde esté en el mundo. Me llamo Carla Estefan, soy productora.
I'm Carla Estefan, producer, creator in Sao Paolo, Brazil. I was invited by Anne and Carla for this project, Kitchen Talks, a series of meetings to talk about creative procedures and creating networks for performing arts. These first two episodes, you probably saw it on the 29th. You can see it on YouTube, Plan B, and then you can check it. All of you watching on YouTube, you can see the prior meeting. And what we have today, with a focus that is similar to what we had before, connected cultural stories. That is the idea of bringing Latin America women that are linked directly to the movement of Latin America performing arts, to have a conversation, to try to creating those connections among us, and maybe to create new opportunities for our artists, our initiatives. This afternoon, I have four dear women. Nayse Lopez, who is from Rio de Janeiro, from Basilio. Shoshana Polanco, Argentinian. She lives between Argentina and Mexico, developing projects with different countries, even with Canada. And also Vera Garat, that works in the different programs, the festival in Uruguay, and also Dianelis Diéguez from Cuba and lives in Spain nowadays, who has developed really interesting projects, even though she arrived in Spain and then the pandemic hit her. We also have our groups for the production that is in Falsamon, that it's a festival that is very close with the Latin American scene. So our activity for today, we're going to be talking for 10 minutes for each one of the speakers. They're going to be presenting. Some of them share material. And after this, we're going to have a second moment that can be Q&A about who is with us, or free dialogue among us. The idea of the meeting is from the challenges that the pandemic, for the thought, for the creation, for everything that we have seen for project management in the performing arts. Somehow in Latin America, we have a situation that is similar because there's not a lot of space for the development of projects, even more for those who do not have a commercial outlook, like is the case of us, that we work more in developing different projects and investigation. We come from the same context. For many of us, the pandemic is something that we are just beginning to go to the different auditoriums for presentation of live activities. So it's very particular. So we would like to talk to you. What are the projects? What are the idea? What things have happened with our initiatives, with the way that we do things from the context that we are living in. I'm not going to go any further. I think it's interesting to hear you, to keep your conversation, and I'm here to continue seeing if it's necessary, because this is completely open. So I'm going to have a brief introduction of everything. And we're going to have the links of the initiatives or your projects, your festivals and everything. And through the different channels. Nayse Lopez is a journalist and she's a curator also. She has become a curator, a journalist, scriptwriter, and performance arts curator. In Rio de Janeiro, she has worked in the Rio Festival, the first entirely online art festival in Brazil. 2019, and they had to cancel the edition, and in 2020, they started developing different initiatives that were very interesting from the pandemic, like Panorama, Luto, Panorama Balsa, Panorama Hat. It's a type of a panorama raft is some type of boat. So the way that the festival have taken from the health emergency that we live, you know, health, educational. So it's a really interesting experience that Nayse is sharing with us. She also created one of the festivals that brought together different initiatives in Rio that developed this festival that I mentioned before, Rio, and like Panorama. So Nayse, I know that is just very little among all your history and throughout time. Just to summarize, and I think that you can speak better than I can with respect to what you have done. Thank you, Carla. Villa Rodriguez, the choreographer that worked on this festival, says something that I like. It's we're becoming older. We cut off the biography because it takes 2 hours from our presentation. So just say the name and everybody can Google us. Otherwise, we're going to be just reading our resume forever. Thank you for inviting me to be here with this group of incredible women. And I'm going to speak briefly because, as Carla says, we don't often have this space to talk to the people that are watching us, and they might be also having a difficult time, so I don't want to talk about this story. What I want to discuss is to think together that the pandemic is the evidence of something that we have been doing for a long time. We're living under a state of emergency, health emergency, where we can see that the emergency that we're living in Brazil, and the cultural development, 15, 17. We have gone back to a prior stage, which is everything about the culture, the arts, and what we want to do. So what I want to share with you is that the festival Panorama is a festival that was born from an initiative of a group of artists in Rio in 1992, and it's going to be almost 30 years. And before anything else, the an interpreter, I'm apologizing with the interpreter because Flavio, that is controlling everything, he's telling me, please, please, please slow down. So we're going to try to do this. Panorama, the festival, is a festival that started in 1992. 30 years, it's going to be 30-year anniversary. It starts with an initiative of a group of artists in Rio to achieve putting their work on scene for the audience, because right now in Brazil, we were living like today because we didn't have any law that was supporting the arts, the foundations, the companies, and something from the governments. In Brazil, we didn't have it. In Rio, we didn't have the politics of the cultural policy. So it was an emergency type of initiative. So that's why I'm saying that we are walking backwards now. So when the festival started, it started like nothing. And now when we look at what has happened, next year, we want to think about something about the 30 years. I was looking at a recording in Ria Rodriguez where she takes out of a box like, you know, just newspaper articles from the second years, because she was celebrating because they had a budget. This is an independent festival, not from, it was not created by a mayor, by somebody. When this festival took place in 2005, they said, oh, well, you know, she didn't want to continue so she can concentrate in her family, her children that she had with her. And she decided that she couldn't do the festival anymore. And she invited me and Eduardo Bonito. A lot of people know it. He worked with me at the festival. And now we have seen this with many other projects. Eduardo and I, we started looking at all of this for the festival. And then we switched to a larger festival. Structured, not professional, more structure with more money. We have achieved this, and it was very timely because of the cultural policies of the government from Lula to have it develop with independent projects, with this outlook to the diversity, to the contemporary creation. So we were able to hold a festival that has been extremely successful, and we've had the opportunity to promote it, which is very important. But what happened? We continue doing all of this in Brazil, started with the cycle, and now we started in the session of, you know, all of this is the fascism in Brazil. Bolsonaro caused the fascism. In 2018, we all agreed, we knew, and we wanted to work hard to make this clear. And it was clear that Bolsonaro was going to be imposing himself at the presidency. So we started with a small addition with the presentation that we had. And we started thinking along with the collaborators about how we could survive. Because ours was a festival, very political, openly political as always, and against the policy of Bolsonaro. And the federal support in 2019, we decided not to use the festival. We decided for the first time not to do the festival as a festival, but to do a manifesto, a letter of performance, where we said that we were in a break and we would look at this break. We were not going to stay in this, it's like a crater on the floor, you know. We were like in the middle of a hole. So we were invited in Paris to have a festival there. So we did Panorama in March 2020, and we were there doing this as a platform for a work that was very political, to work in Brazil about the crisis, the opportunity with the fascism of Bolsonaro in power, and then the pandemic happens. It cancels in the middle of the festival. We came back to Brazil, and it's clear that that was not going to be just for a couple of months, that the pandemic was a lot bigger than that. And then Buraco that we had in 2019 turned very quickly. This hole, this crater that we had before, it turned into like a cemetery full of bodies, you know, and we had, I don't know how many deaths officially. So the festival could not be online because number one, we had no money. Number two, we were not interested in doing little things at home or from home, but where are we standing? So we decided on a strategy of being present, performance in different ways. So we did Panorama Luto. Luto is in Portuguese, is the same. To be in mourning, in grief for those who died. That's what it means in Spanish and in Portuguese. Luto is grieving. So we read different texts. We invited whoever wanted to be with us live, and we decided 1 second for each death when we started on December 12th, and we were going to finish when we completed the number of deaths. Can you imagine right now in December 2020, Panorama Luto lasted 51 hours online, live. If we do it today, it's 1 week live. That's the number of deaths we have. So right now, when this is over, we did this. And I asked myself, what can we do for the artists? Because the artists, you know, what are they going to do? There's no theater. They can't survive from something small and continue. How can we create all of this? And then I thought that we're in South America or Latin America. We know well when the conversation starts with all of us together, we're all culture, we're all art, and I get sick because it's not the same doing art here than doing art in Brussels. It's not the same as doing art in Paris or elsewhere. So what happened is when the pandemic started, everybody started talking about we all are on the same boat. We are undergoing tempest, a storm, and we can see this metaphor about the ocean stayed with me. But I felt that we were in a raft surviving, and then everybody else were in the first class of the Titanic. So we were, we were in the Titanic all, but we were not using the same space. So I started with Panorama Raft with the word in Portuguese. So, this is a little thing to float, and you make it out of bamboo, and that floats. So that's a working instrument for many people, right? So the idea of the raft was the first experience. We were able to get some money because at that point, we were able to put pressure on the government to get aid. The Blanc Law, that is an artist, is a composer that died of COVID. And with this little bit of money that we were able to get, we had the first co-production of 5 audiovisual works. And this happened. And I asked, what are we going to do with the artists that are working and for them to be able to create their work? So we did Panorama Raft, that is the international version of this. And I just called my friends from the different festival, the different artists that are related to Panorama. I asked them for money so we can have a co-production. And with that money, we reproduce work from artists in Brazil that we are using for the first time in September, and 5 scholarships for research. So this Panorama Raft for me is an example of something that can be done. to surpass the idea that we are paralyzed. How can we help Latin America or Brazil? Well, you need to send money. You have money, give it to me, and I can give it to the artist. And that's what we did. You know, I know that I have my 10 minutes are over, but I want to add one thing. We cannot imagine someone in Europe or the United States, in Australia, thinking about how we're going to be resolving the problem of Latin American art. How is it going to survive? They're not going to be thinking how the artists are going to come out of the pandemic. So we have to solve this. We need to talk more. We want to achieve new ways of interaction because we have everything here. We have the ideas, we have all that we need, we have the capacity to do so, and we have to go to these men and women who live in the different countries, and we need to look for the money, a little bit of ideas, because they're not dumb, but we need more money because we know how that happens. That's among us that we need to do. So that's what the kitchen that we need to work on. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that I used more time. No, thank you. I think we could talk for hours, for an hour and a half with each one. There's so many things that we could work on. I'm going to comment later on with respect to what you shared. Shoshana Polanco now it's going to take the floor. She's from Argentina. She was from Argentina, Mexico. She's creative producer with international projection, working in different countries, collaborating as a creator, producer, consultant of important initiatives that promote the art in Latin America. Since the pandemic, she has been part of Capacol project, that is a Canadian project for these for the arts, and she is working in Escénica and also in line with productions. That is an important agency of Latin American artists. She also works in Mexico and some other things. So she was with Teatrería in Mexico, and now you have the floor. Tell us more. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for Nayse for sharing what is happening also. While Nayse was talking, I was asking myself what I was going to share with you with respect to everything that I do. And lately, I have been working internationally and developing connections between Latin American artists and peers in other parts of the world, and among Latin American organizations in different parts of the world. The pandemic has taken us to look to the inside, and it's making it more difficult among the different countries, because if we had a problem in the part about visas for the different tours and the cost that it implies to move everything from one country to the next, so that's another huge topic that is against us. Now we have the topic about the vaccines. What vaccines are accepted? What vaccines are not accepted? Are you vaccinated? You're not vaccinated, and so on. I'm always interested in the challenge of all of this. I've been working remotely with Zoom and online. As Carla said, I'm in Argentina, but I work for Mexico. I'm in Argentina, but I work for Canada. I'm a little bit, working in different spaces. So immediately, I started thinking, how can this be extended to others? At the beginning of the pandemic, I started to looking into other things, Latinx. It was Latin America, plus immigrant artists from Latin America in the United States and Europe. This initiative, I started at the very beginning with Christopher Matawal in the United States. He has a manager, and we started getting together similar to the Kitchen Talk, and it was not broadcast on YouTube or anywhere. It was just getting together, getting to know each other, and to talk about the difficulties, the decisions that the different artists were having around Latin America and their peers in the United States and other countries. And from there, in this space, started to look at this, looking at the different things we were doing, that's when the initiative came up to take this model, different type of model, but a little bit with the spirit, with Capacoa. As Carla was saying, Capacoa, it's an association of presenters from Canada that have been interested for some time in the international development with a particular emphasis in Latin America. Canada, for the past few years, have been investing a lot in getting to know more about Latin America and different organizations, with the idea that is more oriented to the future. So with Judith Parker, that is the international consultant of Capacoa, with my partner, we had a link. It called us to develop this series of conversations. We started to put this together in the cohort, we call it the cohort. And so we have one that is Canada, Argentina, the other one with Chile, with Brazil, with Colombia, with Mexico, Latin America. And at the same time, they have groups from Canada with the Nordic countries, with Asia and Scotland. So this conversation started to take place one every 3 weeks with the countries. And in these conversations, we were inviting 4 programmers from each country. In the example of Argentina, it would be 3 programmers, 4 from Canada, 4 from Argentina, that started getting together. And the third meeting, they invited artists. So each programmer from each country was choosing an artist to join the conversation. So the model was basically, we are in the kitchen, like Nayse said, we're talking, and the idea is not necessarily that the artist is just throwing a pitch like they're in, used in the international markets. She's just here to present his or herself and the vision that they have. And from that initial conversation, from the vision of each artist, and of course, what was the pandemic bringing in each community and so on, we started to have a more philosophical type of conversation, more that the pandemic, it's bringing other things. Just the pandemic set a focus in this crisis that we are having. So the questions are more philosophical. And also, we start looking at the opportunities to collaborate throughout the time that we've had this collaborations with Capacoa. We have different collaborations, like this weekend, we're gonna see work that was filmed in Cordoba in Argentina. Last year, Milton Dean, this year at the beginning, Crystal Lincoln, Patrick Plankman, they were in the FIBA, the International Festival in Buenos Aires. Matias Gutierrez, who was part of the cohort from Argentina, he's also going to be presenting his work in Canada virtually. There have been very interesting conversations that the curator of NABEC, Residents for Dance in Santiago, Chile, and also the direction of dance program in the National Dance Center in Ottawa. And the main objective was to be part of different meetings with different possibilities of collaboration. They're not physical, but virtual. Not all the borders are open, but we trust that in the near future, they're going to be there. The microphone turns off for a little bit. What I was saying is, by not having the obligation that being in a different way that you have to pitch and to sell a project, there was a more comfortable and more trustworthy space where we start to know each other. And something that happened in this world. You hear somebody doing dishes in the kitchen, you hear a baby, you hear a dog, and I think that it makes us more human. In a few of these groups, we have brought everybody together in all the countries together. We have a list of 200 people. When we have just a few, we have 20. When we have a lot, we have 50. We decided to give the floor to one of the people of each country. So we asked Dianelis. If Dianelis says, okay, I want to talk about a specific topic. And then Dianelis comes, he proposes a topic, then we get together in small groups, and then we go back to the big group. So that happens once a week. Every 2 weeks, we have a studio visit. We have given them time, and we'd give the time to somebody from Canada and somebody from another country as well. So during the half hour, the artist shows part of his or her process. They don't have to show us finished works or nothing. It could be somebody talking. With Carla, we've had the opportunity to having a study visit with Nayse from Brazil, who was talking, who was telling us about different things. She shared videos. She showed us something that she had at home, something with important things for her. And from there, we had different ideas as well. We had visits with people in the Nordic countries, with artists that live in contexts that are completely different. Tomorrow, we have a visit with Catherine Hill from Colombia, the young men creators of Choco, that it's an area of a lot of vulnerability, where there's a lot of people murdered every day. And all these realities that have so many things in Latin America and other parts of the world, they share in this half an hour, where we get deeper in the world of these topics. The pandemic needs us, we need, with the pandemic, we need so many things. We need money, we need to generate, we need to, in parallel to this, to generate a space where you can talk, where you can exchange ideas, is what I find very important. And those spaces where we can share. And we have to think how we're going to move forward internationally. And I ask myself, who is not in? Who doesn't have a good internet connection, right? Who cannot speak one language? Because here we have interpretation, which is also a luxury. All of this that we are giving for granted or taking for granted, we have it. A lot of people do not have it. So we see this, all of this moving to the virtual world. It's something that is leaving us behind. So there's so many things to work, and I want to close here because I'm sure that I went over my 10 minutes. Thank you, Shoshana. Yes. The differences, the injustice, it's there. It has been there for a long time. On one hand, we might think that democratization, it's going to reach everyone, but we know that we are fortunate. Now I'm going to give the floor to Vera Garat from Montevideo, choreographer, interpreter, and co-director of an initiative that has the objective to support and to promote investigation through creative processes, hybrid, and that not necessarily are looking to do other things. Vera is co-director of the International Festival in Uruguay. I don't know how you pronounce it. I give the floor to Vera. Thank you for inviting me. When I got this invitation, I was at a presentation where I was sharing some things that I think it's interesting to share with you, to develop here with the experience that I have. As you were talking, PAR is a program for artist residents that came up in 2010, the initiatives of an artist collective that we need to move forward in investigation. And at that time in Uruguay, there were spaces we started to see the support, the funds for the production, and not so much for investigation processes, these experiences that may be invisible that I would like to bring context. That is the experience that happens in the room. And we started with this need to give space, support, to make visible the knowledge of artist investigation, and also something based more in production and results. And then we move with Tamara Gomez, Warsaw, and at the beginning, also a space that is called Casa Rodante. And then we started with the process to dislocate residences to a temporary space. We stop from going to physical spaces to think about residencies as temporary spaces. And what we were getting here is to give framework, to give contention to the processes and artists, and also go hand in hand in the spaces according to the characteristics of the investigation center. This joined together with live arts that usually happen in a room, and understanding that the need of the processes in general are going to be comprised with the specific characteristics of the investigation processes. FIDCU, the first edition was in 2012, and it started with Paola Shubia and Yokurene, and this process has had a lot of movement, but a little bit as Panorama, it comes up from the need of artists and of having a space to meet, from having a context where they were crossing paths among the artists. So the circus process has been changing. It stopped from being a 1 week scale from the initiative of some artists to have a different place to be positioned, that people want to participate. 8 editions, and we're going after the 9th December this year. What I want to bring to the table, it has to do with setting the investigation processes, with the thinking and reformulation that we had all the time that we paused in 2020, and we were leading with Paola the festival. We needed to stop. And I think we stopped 1 week, 2 weeks after the pandemic started, and then we were able to see that the situation rearranged things. We knew that we had to stop because of different reasons. We stopped, but this stop made us ask ourselves what type of festival did we have? What is the format of the festival that we wanted to hold? Having the value in the exchange, to keep the convictions that, or our thoughts are the really insight that we have to do with bring the experience that is outside to the circuits, to work with the new generations that are coming up. In Uruguay, we are going, we have the government of the left, but this is the first time that we have a government that is on the right wing. So this passing from being with the support in certain situations that allowed us to be closer together, now this is being reconfigured, and we want to see how we can have a dialogue with this situation. How do we have to work with the different things that the new government has? So 2 of the questions that started pushing us, what are the actions, the relationships that we can strengthen to work together? What are the links, the conditions for the world we want? Maybe it's a little bit romantic, but it was the question about what really got us going and started being stronger. To get out of the format of functions and to start working in practice and experience of other magnitude in the scale of the festival. Trying to give value the artistic processes where the collective time, the time for reflection and creation are the transforming elements. So that space for the practice, for the reflection, became a basic place, and it's also a closed space, micropolitical space that we are looking into for transformation. I'm going to read you part of the call of FITCU, or the agenda where we call for the participation in FITCU. We decided to do FITCU under the question of what can FITCU do in this context. And after different exchanges and the current situation, we hold the festival once again. After stopping in 2020, the festival is looking to turn into a national level, keeping the importance of the exchange in Latin America and Ibero-America, as well as international, that it's part of the festival. This edition demands being part of the reflection and community with respect to the situation where the contemporary dance is today. With respect to the effects of the image, the social and political existing situation, as my colleagues said, this doesn't necessarily have to do with the pandemic, but it's something that is sustained for some time. And even with the changes in the government in Uruguay, we already had inequalities and very precarious work in dance, and now it becomes just more and more sensitive. This, well, some are more sensitive. In this crossroads, at the same time, we see the role of the art in our society. We didn't add this phrase because we questioned the value of art. It's that we added that phrase because what happened is at one point, everything stopped so sudden that we were thinking about what can we do with the resources that we have available and what is going to be our priority. What can we do with what we have available and what is going to be our priority? That's why I'm going to national type of projects. And we don't forget about the international. Well, the ways that we can create the language of dance and live arts. How can we work, where and for whom? How to make the work and practice more visible, the social implications of dance within a context that has changed. How do we respond in new ways to create in the new contemporary situations? In the past 8 years, things have changed, and we reinforce our conviction with respect to the transforming power behind all of this. We want to activate to be together, to give space to practice invisible processes, to make the hearing more clear. And that's how we ask ourselves the limit of dance as a scenic language and how it works in health, social, and politics. We are asking about the approach of the festival, and these ideas about dance and health have been very strong. The social part, social dance, political transformation, which is something that has been ever strong since ever. But now we understand that the three areas are going to be moving the curating part of the festival. With respect to the practice in micropolitics of the platforms, there's one item that I'm going to finish soon. Currently, live arts are articulated, responding to inherited conceptions of art, not a fragment. This is based on the metaphysics associated to the voluntary association of this. On the other hand, there's the installed idea of the artist as something that responds to the created forces, the structures that support work of the artist, nor the critics have been able to break this idea that show us the basis of most of the construction and legitimization of this formal and informal productive activity that is concrete, and from that point to overcome theory and practice. That is another huge problem. It attempts against the possibility of working from the understanding and valuing what's not material and is not productive. And I bring this to the table because the circuits of internationalization and the market of art is associated to productivity and not so much to material. Art and education handle. So sometimes to set a value on things, we can see the repercussions of art, which is not instant. Maybe there's a distribution that is going to go through everything, that is going to go through society, but it's not going to be a result. That's what I bring this idea of what's material, what's productive, the minimum practice, just to give from that point an idea what has to do with being linked with everything that our colleagues have said, from how from that point we can build context. I think The residence program from the beginning has really turned into working in the spaces, and the festival has really worked about how the works articulate and generate the political change, workshops, conversations, and we have more the idea and to see how the creation processes are a lot more hybrid. Dance practices have a lot of format, a lot of people that work in dance. They practice well, there is just, they are so diverse. So we believe that we need to care for these modifications of diversity, the way that they're expressed, and the platforms, the festival, the spaces that give work to the artist. We also need to change a bit the place that we give to those practices. I can share a little bit more maybe later, and that's what I have for you. Thank you. Gracias, Vera. Thank you so much. There's no question that what we can do as one of the things for dialogue from the presentation is this topic about how to bring to the institutional thought for the organizations that have helped us to understand the value of process. And I believe that maybe that has to do with how the governments look at the culture in the country. Like from Brazil, in Latin American countries, there's no cultural policy. There are projects of cultural activities. Culture is seen as a marketing product. So if I cannot see a final product, how can I be part of this? And I think one of the paradigms is that we live in one of the biggest in the culture of access and as art, because these are two different things. We can see different movements. We're producers, we articulate, we are curators, creators, and we have a huge structure. So there's no question that the interesting question about going this way, how do we assess, how do we appraise these processes and not only the products? The digital context, that we don't know how to charge. So there's another problem for us. Now we go with Dianelis. Dianelis, Cuban, Spanish, Latin, from the world. Central America, critical, cynic, and the investigator of the University and Arts. She's working in management of multidisciplinary projects and performing arts. She lives in Spain. 2020, she moved to Spain in 2020. She arrived there with the pandemic, and now she's going to be for the next editions for Salmon Festival. That is the festival in Barcelona of live arts. She's in a new cycle of curating, and she's in charge of artistic coordination and production. I'm sorry if I missed anything. You have the floor, dear. I'm going to see if I can have time. I want to thank Carla. I want to thank everyone for inviting everybody that is behind this proposal and this project. And also I want to thank that I can share the space and conversation with those who are here on the screen, because somehow a Cuban abroad in Europe now, and obviously my experience is different. So I want to thank you for that. And when I was thinking from where to set myself in order to participate now about me and what I'm doing, I was thinking that what makes my experience so particular is the moment and the condition that I'm going through, the situation that I'm living through. And I think the most honest thing is to speak from there. I'm Cuban. That got to Barcelona a year and a half ago. And in the pandemic, so a few days before confinement was declared in Barcelona, is that I got as a guest to the Salmon Festival of that year in 2020. And a year and a half later, somehow, I'm beginning to live under the condition or to realize what it means in a country like this to be an immigrant. So even though it's a privileged immigration with respect to other immigrations, really, I'm still an immigrant that arrived in Barcelona. With this, it has set me in two different areas and to manage two areas of my life. On one hand, my relationship with Cuba today, which is a relationship that is debating between keeping contact, to keep proximity, and at the same time, to detach a little bit from that, from the place where you're not and where you cannot be. And on the other hand, in finding the new context, the new continent, the new country, the new city, and new language, because in Barcelona, they speak Catalan as well. So for me, I think my life is debating between managing a little bit of that experience. I have to be honest, I would like to talk about Cuba and the projects that I'm working and what is happening in Cuba. But I must confess that right now, to me, it's difficult and complex to talk about Cuba from the distance, first of all, because I'm physically distant, and number two, because this is reading my own identity in the distance, because when we move, when we have the opportunity to look at our lives as if they were just a movie, our past, as if it was a movie. And on the other hand, I think the most important thing, with absolute respect to the complex political, social, and economic moment where Cuba is undergoing, that doesn't have to do exclusively with the pandemic that we know that really enlarges a lot of the problems, but a political crisis that somehow, and I say quote unquote, in an unusual manner for me, for a Cuban that is 30 years old and that has lived in the Cuban Revolution all her life. I think because of respect by not being there, it's very difficult for me to talk from the projects and the things that are happening in Cuba that I think are good projects, and a lot of resistance to crisis, to the democratic and political crisis in which the country is in the midst. So I'm a Cuban that arrived in Barcelona, and I got to Barcelona in a very complex moment, and I see a structure like El Granero. El Granero is a space of creation, one of the creation factories in Barcelona. What's interesting is that beyond everything, artistic programming is a space to support. It's a space where the practice and methodology has to do more with listening, having artists for a prolonged time, with methodology of proximity at work, contact. And in this context, I'm also, got closer with Salmon. Salmon really, in 2020, turned 9. And it's a historical festival that takes place every 2 years. and always had been a structural change, even if it's minimum, but it had always had, just a particular situation. And Salmon 2020 stopped being a festival that was managed by a certain group, this part of the culture and dance in Barcelona. And, with the support of Granet in 2020, it was not going to be anymore part of their festivals, and it was inviting 4 structures in the city that urgently could co-organize the festival. So I got here not only during a crisis, but also at a time where the festival is resetting up. Under this structure, I'm one of the guests, and to the group of conversations, and I was one of the people that was part of these conversations to see what is the need of salmon in a context like Barcelona, and asking the same questions that to me it was really surprising with respect to the European realities. And you really take in the reality of Europe, and there are periphery areas here, and there are other practices that cannot be compared with the peripheria in Latin America, but they're completely different dimensions. The European reality is not a homogeneous reality. What happens in Spain is not the same as what happens in Switzerland, in the Netherlands, in the Nordic countries, just at the level of management. I got to Salmon at a time where they're rethinking what they're doing. Salmon was also a festival that was pointing out, like Carla said at the beginning, a festival that has generated direct context with Latin American projects and Latin American situations that wanted to relate with what was being done on the other hand, with the other side of the Atlantic. And I think that's how I started to have a really interesting relationship and to start with the structure of rethinking a project. Rethinking a project has to do with the possibility that different areas of the city join the strength of a festival. And what was important or interesting to me was that Salmon, up to that point, it was taking on practice that were being experimental, the same idea, the same reflection in the notion of experimenting change. It was no more about seeing this in a creative part, but right now Salmon is non-existent. It's a festival that doesn't have its own mix. It doesn't have a legal figure. It's not a co-op. It doesn't have an identity behind. So Salmon takes place with the will of people from the city that want to hold salmon. Okay, I have to slow down a little bit. Really, I believe that this part that has to do with how frail a project can be is something that may seem a problem to be solved. It has also been something that has placed Salmon as a festival in a different dimension, the dimension of what I believe it's called Plan B. Salmon is not a festival. It was a festival that did exist pre-pandemic. The pandemic made us say, okay, we need to invent a structure that is not there. We need to hold a festival under protocol conditions that we didn't have, we couldn't imagine before. And instead of taking on Plan A, that is holding a festival in theaters with the artists, with the exhibition or exchanging, having an exchange among artists. No, Plan B is to rehearse a non-existing structure being managed in a shared manner in different spaces, inviting different groups and artists to curate the festival, to propose contents for the festival. And that's at the structural level. And at the level of contents, we can see it on TV as a means, and in a theater, Mercado de las Flores, in the situation that they thought it was like a play set up and there were things happening directly. They invite a group of artists for several hours to share, to live together in the same space. And from that space, simulation of a TV plateau and under the device of a TV, that was the format that everything was running, the content of what was going on. It was contents that were completely alive. And I'm just saying, because it had been foreseen within this space. So to me, the pandemic, the experience, and the professional experience of the work with them has to do with the idea of assuming Plan B as a model, as a way to navigate in life. All of us producers, we always have Plan A. Usually, we have Plan A to work this way, Plan B. And if we don't have a Plan B this way, but this is the reality that we have. We work with this reality, and to create a piece to be transmitted, what are the tools of the reality where we can navigate? That was my experience, and the particularity of the pandemic experience this year, and it has been so difficult. That's what I have. I don't know if I run out of time. No, you're okay, you're okay. You're fine, you're fine. I think we were able to know your context, the context of each and every one of us. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything with respect to what the colleagues have said. I would like to say a couple of things, but it's not mandatory. So we're going to continue. I would like to hear about how technology opens new possibilities, and how we had a lot of projects that were developed on the internet with what was said and what Nayse, and this doesn't mean that we're not going to have the quality. Everything that it's the participating is in this new language. I would like to hear about how it was for you, for your initiatives, to try to work in the virtual world. We're talking about a new situation. How can this how is this for you in your practice? I would like for you to dwell on this, and if somebody wants to participate in after this, you can also ask questions and share a little bit more, so please. I would like to share the experience of Mexico, because I talked about Mexico and I didn't talk about, I talked about Canada and not Mexico. I've been working with Teatrería, that is an independent space in Mexico City. And we have 2 theaters, 127 and 150 seats. We didn't know what was going to happen. And immediately we started working online. Monetization at the beginning was complex. How to charge, how to collect, what to charge. It was difficult, but it came up with the possibility of working with an Argentinian company that has been doing this, like the Netflix of the scenic arts. They were looking for a partnership with somebody from Mexico. So Teatrix Mexico, it's going to be 1 year old very soon. And this is an extension of the theater. And it's not, it doesn't have a defined curating line, but this is a space where any artist can be shown. We choose the content. It's not a festival that is curated. It's a space where the work can be shown. At the beginning, since we didn't have any material, we invested in filming different plays. The pandemic was, hit us in the midst of the production. We had all the scenography and everything, but we couldn't open to the public. So we have different scenographies in different places in Mexico City. These were already set up. So we were able to film without audience, to invest in good filming, good cameras, and so on. So now we constantly are uploading material. And when I'm talking about material, it could be dance, it can be music, it can be theater, it can be something completely commercial, and it could be something avant-garde, really. We don't want to have a cutoff point, and we don't want to do it because we don't think that we should, because this is an economic model that where we're not going to be making money immediately. It's not that we're going to be paying a fee to the artist, but the work starts becoming part of a catalog, and the artist, the production, the owner of the material gets royalties. Royalties that is related to the number of times that the material is being watched. So the person who signs the platform, they pay for a monthly subscription that it's pretty inexpensive. And they can see everything that we have in the catalog. We have in Mexico and Argentina, from the UK. We are talking with companies in the Netherlands, and we're looking for more and more materials. And this is not something that is bringing money to the company right now, but this is something that is there, that is going to stay there, and it's bringing royalties. And I think with time, I was seeing artists that said, well, my material, like the Argentinian festival is one of the most important festivals in Mexico, where many artists wanted to be there. And they said, oh, they're not going to schedule me at the Cervantino festival. And I think with time, they started generating an understanding that to be online, that the work that is online is not stopping us to see this work at another point. That doesn't mean that we cannot schedule this. And I think these parallel lines in a country like Mexico, this is about giving the public access to materials that otherwise they won't be able to see. The reality is that the number of people that can pay for a trip or to get to the Cervantino, Guanajuato, is a small amount of people. They can, many people get to Mexico City, but they don't get to a smaller cities like Tabasco, Tlalpan, or any other region. And I think this is a benefit for the audience as well as for those people that bring the material. And this is a platform that joins, that is bringing more to and being open. We only have 1 year and we can improve, this can change. And I think this is a window that open, but it's really a small space. How can we continue working for the time that the theater was closed? I want to say something very briefly. As Shoshana says, what happens is because we were online, it was possible to hold a festival with a huge reach that we've never had before. Because from the people that can see us on the internet, from the 10 projects that we pay, that we produce, 8 became films and will always be films, and 2 were live. And this was an experience that for us, when I look at the statistics of who, where watched us, is impressive. Same as Panorama being such well-known is this, and this is a privilege in people that is in the southeast of the country, because there's a lot of offering, but the people in Brazil do not have the same possibilities. So with what Shoshana was saying in Mexico, but not only those people that watch, but from the artists that were online willing to work, because and they were not so concerned about the money. And it was not a festival that I say that we did the curating with the characteristics the way we did. It was a public call. People from throughout the country presented, and we have work from places in Brazil that we didn't know, that we didn't have in a country such as Brazil, as big as Brazil. I think that the internet access, that it can be a problem here. We might seem a country that has a lot of internet, we have a lot of social media, a lot of things, but we are a country that does a lot of social media, but not much of quality internet. So we are always managing both realities. Yes, it can be a window that we can use, and this is real, but also the internet is a space where people live different lives. People that has a high-speed internet has a type of life, and the one that uses the internet on the mobile with the prepaid $20 card. How can you imagine an environment, a virtual environment for the scenic arts that with the pandemic can keep what's good out of this window that has opened? For those of us that work with different countries, how can we keep working with the internet as a space for access? And on the other hand, how can we not fall in the space where we were? It's very easy to fall into this space of privilege. Because when we had this situation in Panorama, people were sending messages on WhatsApp, and they were saying, oh, I'm doing wonderful. They were sending a picture because they had a smart TV. Yes, they were connected to a super internet and they were doing wonderful. And some other people, they were not as lucky to be able to watch the shows. So, to me, the topic of democracy on access to cultural activities is not clear, because with the use of the internet is going to save us. Yes, it saved us completely, absolutely saved us. But how can we not leave it completely, because some projects are not completely? Because in Europe, you talk about online, they're like, no, it's over. But I believe it's a luxury not to have anything online. It's a luxury because it's for a country where everybody can take a 2-hour train ride to be at a theater. And for us, in our countries, if I can have something online that someone that is starting the research and studying dance in a place that is far away, why not? She's going to have the same experience that somebody saw it live in Rio. It's not going to be exactly the same, but she's going to be able to see something that she otherwise wouldn't be able to see. So I think that we need to continue working, and we need to understand what's lost, what we win, and what's the balance that we can have in this. I think it makes perfect sense. I want to say something. I wanted to bring this micro politics topic. This is something that is a feature of Latin America. This thing about what we are doing, and when we start talking about technology, to think that technologies are tools that were already there. We have developed so much technology to break the circuits that are already set. And this situation just adds another layer, one more layer of a possibility of doing this. And yes, we want to share, to say that this is open. And what we see about how do we generate the possibilities for the artists to develop their tools, the way they do things for this context, that also has to do with the possibility of having on the internet or not a space for the work, but to be loyal, to be fair with what's being moved politically. I think the challenge would be to bring and make democratic using the tools without creating problems, but seeing from the collective, from everybody that is looking at the different things. That's the biggest thing that we can see in technology, because we're trying to look at different goals all the time. How do we relate to this? Well, this has to do with a question, and then what's behind all of this? And that's what I have. With the internet, I believe, to me, this is one more tool It has been used so often, and some other times they're broader. As a new territory that we occupy and that we see awareness, to have awareness of all of this, what we need to do to move forward is to understand that you cannot just stay in one single place in your comfort zone. Yes, because it's like being at home. At the beginning, you have a new home, you want to do this, you want to do that, but it gets to a point, where we need to do other things. And to find a place where the internet can, it's not just a place, it's a platform. It has to turn into a tool that goes into the process exclusively. That is not exclusive, this is reservoir. And to see something that is more holistic, how can we make sure that the internet, it's for all. We have heard that the next huge crisis is going to be technology WhatsApp, a technology blackout. We had a problem with WhatsApp and with Facebook a few days ago, and it was chaotic for a lot of people. But there's a system that is giving us a tool of visibility to certain things, and also to remember that there are projects that are susceptible to being filmed, artistic and cultural projects that are not part of the scene, because they're not part into the category of programming, because these are processes that depend so much in doing, in a practice that happen at a place, at a movement, at a situation where clearly the internet is not more than just, it's not more, it's just a tool. These are situations that allows us to see the different uses of the internet and multiple dangers that this can represent without satanizing it. We know that we live in a controlled world, that they know all the information. We know this for some time. Our governments, our representatives also have known this for a long time. So the problem on the internet with the mind of certain people that have created all this entire mechanism, it's not about that. It's about political interests that go beyond the tool of the internet, and that they are beyond the doers of the internet. So I believe that in this sense, we have to use both things, both sides of the coin, not to set it as the only thing, to understand that it's a tool and not just like a place to displace or to socialize our practice, our work. Yeah, we know about that monster. What do we do with it? With respect to what Vera mentioned, and just to close this topic and maybe go to the next one, there's no question that dance, performing arts, and the movies have a management with video, with the internet, for the artists that work to have a history of dance, even the language of dance. In the theater, this was a topic that was discussed openly. Artists say, no, there's no in the theater, but this conversation has developed. It was not necessary to classify this as a theater, but other type of experience with things that develop in the theater and different characters, and even with dance, we have something clear, but it also depends on the artist, it depends on the space, it depends on the proposal. In Brazil, what I had was about 20% of the people for the live arts, the scenic arts. So they somehow had a privilege. It would be interesting to talk about the projects that you developed before the pandemic in 2012. So a little bit about that. We had artists that were looking at this, and they were looking at the language, they experienced, and they really liked it. So I think this is a little bit of what Shoshana talked about, what continues to be developed and some others don't. And I continue saying, all of you, how far does technology and work and the development of different things over the internet was different, was interesting, or was not, or it was a frustration? And I live the following question. It would be the audience. How do you see the dialogue with the audience in these times that we're undergoing? What Carla was saying, in 2018, a telephone company in Brazil that has been very important in culture and arts approached us about 15 years ago. They were working with different festivals, and they have everything. They have a center for the investigation in art. This space told us about what we can do together. What would we be interested in looking at if we had a project? You know, what we had at the end. The proposal was to have an online festival. People could not even imagine, and people were laughing when we said we're going to have an online festival. That was the idea. Back then, the idea was, how can we have content for the internet, for investigation in this language that this festival's work, dance, theater, performance, cinema, and music, electronic music particularly. And for children, one of the festivals that we had, the different platforms. So what was the content that we could hold? And then we look at this, we got the money and we did this. It's there if somebody wants to see it. It's the EO Festival. And in 2018, one of the things that we had, a group of projects, I had a project like Panorama that was dance at home or homemade dance. They said if people could have dance or put together a dance at their own home, I thought it was absurd. But then, and we had money to pay. We had money to pay people to do that at home. So I invited, I don't know how many artists, and many said, never, I'm never going to do anything like that. I'm not interested in this. I'm not a TikToker. I'm not an Instagrammer. I'm not a, you know. And what happened at the end? 6 artists did it. It's done beautiful. It's very interesting. And at the end of the day, what we have talking with other festivals about this project was a different energy. And something that I'm interested in thinking is, out of this experience 2 years ago, what are we going to do with respect to the scenic arts and the internet? Because one thing is what I need out of this to pay my home. I have to do something online. This is what I have, and I need to have this and that. I'm going to survive. This is what I need. Another one is to think, how can I create something, what I'm doing in theater? This is not about survival. This is not about a bad version of what I was doing before. So for me, this is clear. People are looking at this and they may think this is possible, but the RAF project, I called a group of speakers and programmers, you know, different festivals. And some said, this is wonderful, but I don't have the money. Oh, this is wonderful, but I can't approve sending the money without knowing who the artist is. That was a catch. All the partners that participated, they had to give the money and make the commitment without knowing who were the artists. So all the money came in, we made a public call. As Brazilians, we chose the artists and they paid for things that they didn't know. It was the project of Americans that were coming and said, oh, I'll give you a little bit of money and you do this and you do that. No, at this time, other programmers were saying, I'm not going to accept my work turning into doing things online. And programmers that I respect, that I love, that are my friends, my space is going to be closed until we can do it live. This is a way to see what happened. A lot of people feel that for scenic arts that came from a crisis everywhere, how can we tell someone, well, you're at home, you can look at this, you can look at that in your TV, in your computer, in bed, no more. Now you have to leave the house, you have to pay the theater, you have to pay for the wine that you're going to be drinking. And once again, do something. And this is the night that you're going to have. And some people feel that that's basic. I don't have the certainty, but that's the only way that I can think about this. But it's difficult, it's different. From a year ago, what I see and everything I see, and I don't leave the house. What I think, to close this topic about the internet, is that we also have to think for the independent artists to hold or to put together a play over the internet, things that need different technology. Somebody has to believe that this is important and to do it. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that people have so little money, and all the money that could be the experience in technology, we're not going to be paying for this. We're going to be just there and needing work. It's not about just saying, oh, we're going to continue with the implementations for the internet. There has to be a program that gives us the support for the arts, that understands that this is something that must be paid for. Otherwise, how are we going to pay for this? We go back to the privilege that Shoshana talked about. It's the privilege of those artists that said, no, I'm going to stay and I'm not going to work for a year. And those artists, likewise, may have families that help them, really wonderful husbands or wives, and they don't have to pay bills. The other artists that need to work, they can't be without work for a year. It makes me worried to think who's going to continue with the experience over the internet, something that has to be done. Otherwise, we go back to the privilege of the four that have money to buy different things, or MEC, that Latin America people know. It's not like in Spain. In Spain, you buy a MEC, it's not good. In Brazil, a MEC, it costs 3 minimum wages. So it's the work of un Macintosh, a Mac. To buy a Mac, somebody has to work for an entire year to buy a Mac. Yes, I want to use this opportunity to talk about the dialogue with the audience and the experience that you've had in this pandemic times. How did you feel the audience? Democratization brings to us people that could otherwise never go. Somehow, the people that were used, do they continue going on social media? How do you see the dialogue? How do you see it through the devices? I'm not certain that we reach people that wouldn't otherwise go to the theater, because in our case, the problem is that the money that we got went to the artists and for the four people that participated and worked. Everything we did on the internet, it was the social media, the artists. And so our scope, our reach in social media, it's very important for us. With respect to who gets the information that right now they're going to see it, it's conditioned if you have the money to go into social media. We didn't have the money. So I believe that we reach people that knew that this was going to happen. What's true is if we had another festival in Rio we probably have more things in Rio and less in other spaces or places in Brazil, because traveling is so expensive. In the digital format, we had a different situation, because it was the same to be from the center, the north, from Rio. It would cost the same to be at the festival. So there's something that changes here, but with respect to the audience, what I saw in YouTube was people that are really into the artists, that know the festival, that got to social media. In terms of numbers, we had about 12,000, depending on the statistics, between 12,000 and 15,000 attendees to those shows that we had. So you think that 15,000 people attended from beginning to end. Those are the figures of the internet. So there are other things. Some others had 100, others had 600. So to be an artist that is better known, to be older, to have different situations, social media active, with respect to all of this, we also have to think about this. Part of the project is for the audience, but that was happening in live. So the festival, what is that we have been calling for several years in Panorama, has always been fighting about taking the money to programming, to pay the equipment to go to the different places, the different spaces for the information of cultural access. So other people come, because Leah Rodriguez would say something that the festival has always been very cheap price-wise. In 2001, the festival had a price of $1. And this is in the catalog, had no picture, the catalog, the pictures were things that cost $1. One cake, one Coke, things that were $1. And right now they said, no, it's not necessary to spend $1 if we only have people that can pay 20, which is the truth. The projects for contemporary art are like that. If we don't look for us, the people that need us to be cheap, it's everybody else, it doesn't matter if it's 1 or it's 20. The internet is a little bit the same. So we are like really comfortable, a little bit of inertia, social media, communicating who's there. We did this voluntarily, organized in an organized manner, with the effort of bringing the people that today are with us. I know there's so much to do in this respect if we want to go to the internet as something that is more accessible, because in reality, what is accessible over the internet is more commercial. So the way that we work and what we do. Vera, can you share? I think there's something very particular. And just to share the process for creation, it's not necessarily the end product or the work, but can you share, now that you have the open call for the festival, how with the artists that are independent, that are not commercial, how do they see this dialogue with the audience now that is happening with the festival? Something that happens here is that it changes context because there's so many young artists. 2 or 3 years ago, the first graduates from the National Dance Institute and Contemporary Dance, and the graduates of dance, they are all the different groups. The artistic high school has been around for a couple of years for public education. Now it's in crisis. That's one of the things that are happening right now with the current government. And what happens with this situation under the new context is bring a lot of young people, a lot of new artists, working students, and a good part of the festival. There's a part of the festival that is part of the training, the presentations, cross presentations, and different audience and different, different audience. And more people to have access to the festival here. And, it's more from Montevideo than from Uruguay because we don't have the energy to get out of the capital city. Yes, we've had a few things out, but what we're doing is that the artists can define where they want to work. The artists from the place that they work and make different movements of dances. There's movements of social dancing, folk, critical. There are movements that are a lot more hybrid, that they're showing up with, strong. And the idea is that all of this is done from a place where can really be believed. And we're going to see how this call works, but the idea is that the artists feel enabled to define where their action has to occur. Something that might be a practice, a conversation that has the format that is streaming. That's the movement that we have. How is this going to work with respect to the audience? That's a big question, to be honest. We're trying to change the format that we have and more towards the movement of the festival in different contexts. And it's also, most of the budget is being spent on the artists. And the production, that it's about creation. Yes, I'm sure that with this format of calls that the artists develop everything in their territory. So this type of audience from that territory probably will get involved, and not necessarily is going to be an audience that is going to be something from the more under dialogue, different from other years. If we can look at this with more anticipation, how is this going to happen? And the call about what's, for Ibero-American. we share the websites, and we see what we have to do. Dianelis, do you want to show you? I know that even though it's difficult, but maybe you can share something, and we probably have to close because we are running out of time. I'm going to be brief because I don't want to repeat. And it has to do with the perception. I have reflected a lot because with the use of the internet as a platform, we're thinking a lot about what needs to be done for the artist and the need of the artist, about making its work visible, but we are not exploring with the same intensity the relationship with the public, the return of that audience. We need to know how many of them have been connected, the control on this product, the audience that has to be connected even more in what they're looking at in the projects that is being used, that is being consumed. They can be looking at you, they can be controlled by different things. And that consumption is a word that I don't like, but that relationship with the experience is completely different from the experience of being in one place, unique, relate to the tool in a easier manner or in a more complex manner, because if I sit my grandmother in front of a computer, she's not going to know what to do. And I'm not going to be showing her how to connect to the internet. So when I talk about audience, I don't know what type of audience we're talking about. And we're not just talking about privilege. We're talking about learning, other type of learning, placing on the table the internet in the relationship with the audience, and which audience we have to take care of, which is the audience that we are geared to, whatever you want to call it, that experience, but that in effect, this is not a generic audience, as we can see, is a concentrated audience. I think we have a lot to learn, a lot to explore. Our geological time is short to learn so fast. The advances of technology and the permanence of things. And I don't know if Shoshana is going to have a minute. I just want to thank for the opportunity of listening to you, because what I appreciate more about this time is to have this type of connections, and because, you know, things are so complicated. So why haven't I met so-and-so before, you know? Or how didn't I meet all of you before? Something good about the pandemic is this, the possibility of hearing different voices, to have empathy with different realities, and not to pretend that there's one single one that is valid. All our realities are valid. And to continue with the possibility of stimulating each other mutually, and to know that we have all these possibilities and as connecting points, privilege in this space, to continue disseminating and sharing all of this with other people. As soon as I hear you, I said, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so, it would be good to be connected with Nayse, with Dianelis, with Vera, because that's what happens. We want to replicate. We want to continue multiplicating the internet, the presence on the phone, whatever way, to keep replicating this. And not to think that there's one single way of doing things, because there are thousands, millions that are going to continue. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to listen to you and to learn from you. Thanks everyone. Thank you, and saying that sometimes I don't pick up the phone, but if you WhatsApp me, I'll answer always. So just very quickly, I forgot to say something at the beginning and we didn't do. And I think it's very important. In all the work that we have done in Panorama 2 years ago, we started doing something very simple, that is auto description. And for people that are looking at us, it makes it easier because it takes us to the minimum of sensitivity, shared sensitivity. So if somebody is watching us and they can't see, but they can look at us, and a lot of people with the internet, they can participate, but they don't see. It makes a huge difference with respect to what we're doing because it's relevant for what we're doing. For example, to know that there are 5 Latin American women, it's different from being brunettes. It's just because of the color of the skin. The privileged part of Latin America is different. It doesn't matter if I have short hair, long hair. It might be nice, but to say that I'm white is different. You know, it's politically important that if I was Black. And when you talk about the place in Panorama, there's money to have sign language and subtitles when it's possible. Because as Dianelis was saying, the grandma is not only the grandma that cannot use the internet, but maybe that she can't see anymore. And she would love to have an audio with the description of what's happening, or maybe someone, a man or a woman that can't read, that there's things that are written and that they get lost. And they have to remember that we are working with a more inclusive society, and a more inclusive society has to do, how can we produce for everyone? Not only people that is privileged like we are, to live in a body that is more adapted to the society. It's different. So people that have deficiencies or limitations have to be part of this democracy, to leave or set aside to the end. And thank you so much to everyone that is here, and let's continue talking, because this is what it's all about, is we're going to keep talking and finding solutions among us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this last comment. I said that is so important. Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. There's no question that if we're going to talk about putting together audience, these are things that are obvious, that we must develop, that we must have. And I believe for the next few years, we're going to have to look to see how to bring more differences, to share, to contribute with what we think here. So yeah, maybe we're white with straight hair, a privileged situation, but we are suffered and we're breathing everything that is happening in the world. So I believe that we're looking to open new possibilities for dialogue, finding each other, new possibilities, finding a space for us to develop our projects. I believe that the meetings that we've had, we have a interesting situation of what's going to continue happening in Latin America for performing scenic arts, live arts, and hopefully we're going to have an opportunity, whether it's in the virtual world and the live world, in the same continent. Maybe it's not as difficult as going across the Atlantic Ocean. So thanks to each and every one of you for the opportunity of being here, coordinating these meetings. You must know that in about 2 weeks, you're going to have other meetings with other creators of the different alternatives. And Viva Latin America. Flavio Barolo, thank you so much for being here with us. Our interpreter. No, I'm here. I want to thank for your work. No, I don't want to kill you. No, you were not that fast. Everything is fine. Está bien. Está bien. Está bien. No. Flavio, thank you. Anne, are you still with us?
Yes, hello, thank you.